In the first year of the program, we spliced stranded rope, 3-strand rope to be exact. Now we want to splice, in the second year of the program, we want to splice double braid rope. This is a double braid rope. This happens to be 3/8 double braid rope. Much smaller than probably you've got on your winch of your digger derrick or aerial basket. But if you have this type of rope on your digger derrick, you realize that it has good dielectric qualities about it. It's strong. It has low stretch properties about it. Nylon, if it was in a stranded rope, would be it would have a high stretch to it. However, the design of this rope minimizes the stretch. This double braid rope is just as it sounds. There's a cover here with a core inside, and both of them are hollow, and each handle 50% of the tension applied to that rope. When we spliced stranded rope, we didn't have to use special tools. We just braided it. However, because of the design of this rope, what we have to do, we have to separate this core and cover, and then insert one inside the other, and then tuck it back inside the cover. So there's a special procedure that we use. There's also special tools that we have to use. And the tools that we'll use will be, first of all, there's a pusher, and it has a wood handle. It's a rod with a rounded point on it. And then we have a fid, which is used also as a measuring tool. It has scribe marks on it. We'll show you those, but the scribe marks you can see right here now are used for measurement. And the overall length of the fid is one measurement, and then from the scribe marks to one end, which is a shorter end, by the way, is called a short fid, and that's also used as a measurement. This fid has a slot here in one end. There's a hole in it. It doesn't go all the way through, of course. It's designed to assist you in inserting the cover and the core into one another. The procedure that you use is something similar to where, well, maybe you've seen mothers would take a cord and insert it into a parka hood by the use of a safety pin. They put a pin on the end of the cord and then they would insert it through. Well, we're going to use this fid pretty much the same way. It has a rounded tip on it, so that it won't snag your strands. This rope we're using has a cover that is nylon, and of course the core is also nylon, but they snag quite easily. There's an art to it. There's kind of a trick to it, so you'll want to practice with it. Some of the rope might have a polyethylene cover on it, which makes it sometimes somewhat easier to work with. Each has its preferred uses and so on, but the one we're going to use here today will have nylon core and nylon cover. Now what we want to do is use these tools along with a marker pin, and you can use some kind of a permanent marker like this, or you could use a felt tip pin. Each work. Here's a knife. Now this knife I've sharpened with a 10 mil file, makes it easier to cut rope. It's a lineman's knife, safety knife. Another piece of material that you'll need will be tape. And a lot of times before I start, I cut pieces of tape off and stick them on the edge of the table here so that they're handy for you. The one thing you'll find is that when you're working with this rope, is that the ends will fray quite readily, so you have to capture those ends so they don't get away like this. I've got this end taped up. Tape it up before you cut it in the center. Now, what we want to do is when we cut anything, make sure you cut on this handle is wood, and it works nice for cutting. Be real careful about your table. Okay, what we want to do is finish off the end of our rope with an eye splice. And you can see this eye splice is considerably different from the eye splice that we made with our stranded rope. And you can see that here's our reference mark here. But this rope is actually, the core and cover separated, then they're inserted into one another and then pull right back down inside the rope. So there's a little bit of a trick to it, and we'll go through the steps of making up an eye like this. Okay, the first thing we have to do with our rope is to go back about 5 fid lengths back on our rope, and that's an approximation. And what we have to do is go back here and we have to put a knot in this rope. And the purpose of this knot is to keep from disturbing the core and cover further back. We're going to be adjusting the core and the cover on our rope, and we just don't want to get the whole rope out of balance. So we'll tie that knot so that when we adjust our core and cover here, that we won't have to worry about the rest of the rope being disturbed. Okay. Now we mentioned that we use this fid for a measuring tool. We're going to make up an eye in our rope, and the first thing we have to do is measure 1 fid length from the end of our rope, and then we're going to mark that spot. We're going to put a scribe mark right around that whole rope, and so that we know that spot. Now we're going to call that a reference point. And if you have a finer pin than I've got here, you might try marking an R right on that, but it's really tricky. That nylon absorbs that, and it might be easier for you just to put 1 scribe mark here, and then when you go to another mark, put 2. That's usually an effective way. Okay, now what we want to do is make an eye on here. So we want to establish the right size. Now this is a 3/8 rope. You know, in your winches, you're probably going to be working with rope that would be more like 7/8. 7/8 rope would replace 1/2 inch wire rope. This eye that I've got here now is approximately maybe 3-inch eye. This is, like I say, only 3/8 rope. The only difference between splicing this and splicing 7/8 rope is that you're going to use different size fids and pushers. They'll be the size necessary, so that and of course the scribe marks and everything are also on those pushers and fids. Okay, now what we want to do is establish the size eye we need, and then what we'll do is mark. In other words, this is my reference point right here. Just opposite that reference point, we want to put another scribe mark around that rope. and this will be our extraction point. And what we can do is, if you can do it now, just mark an X on there. That'll be our extraction point. Okay. In other words, right at this point is where we're going to extract our core. Okay. Now, when you make up a splice like this, what you're actually doing, you're inserting the. We're gonna actually separate the core and cover on the end of this rope, and we're going to take the core out of the cover right at this extraction point, right at our X point. Okay. Now we'll back off a little bit. To get that out of there, what we have to do is use our pusher. This pusher has got a rounded tip on it, and it works out quite well to get a hold of it. But the big trick in getting that core out of the inside of that cover is to separate those strands right at our mark, right at our extraction point. Separate them, such a point, and then make sure you don't snag either the core inside or the cover on the outside. If you grab a hold and pull one of those, you'll disturb the strands all the way through, and you'll probably not get them back to their original position again. So what we have to do is move these strands that are on the outside. Just work them a little bit. Maybe I'll pull in so you can see that. This is kind of a tricky thing too. What I want to do is move these strands aside without snagging any of them. And then what you want to do is with this finger now, around the back, you can feel that pusher going around into the back. And then what you want to do is mold them, push the strands aside, or not strands, but the fibers aside in such a way that you can see that core. Now we're getting to the point where you can see that core right there, and I've got my pusher around to the back side. Now if I grab a hold of that in such a way that I work my strands aside, I can pop that core right out of the inside there. You see where it's coming out now? Okay, go around, pull on it. Then what we want to do is to pop that out. And get a hold of it. Now, when I get it out here, I'll show you now, we'll get it out here. We'll be able to make a loop in it. Okay, we'll come back in again. Okay. Now what we've got, I've got that core pull right out of the side of that reference, or that extraction point where we put our X. That's where we've got our core coming out. Now what I want to do is to pull on that. I want to pull it out from the end here. Now I want to pull the core, and you'll see it'll bunch up. See how it pulls together? Okay. What I want to do is to pull on that now, and then I'll pop it loose out of that tape. But I don't want to grab it and jerk it right out of there completely. I want to keep those strands from rattling. So when I break it loose like that, then I'll hang on to it in such a way that I can feel when I get to the end of that, and then hold on to those strands. Hold on to them like that so they don't get away from you. Now I want to tape those. And this is one of the trickier jobs as well. What you have to do is to tape that as tight as you can, and then taper it off towards the end to a point, and then cut the end of it off. Now I've got some tape cut here. I'm going to wrap that, and I'm going to twist that in such a way that it'll be tight. And then I'm going to keep twisting right towards the end. Taper my tape right out towards the end. And then when I get out to the end, twist it. And then what I'll do is just cut that off. Cut off the excess tape. And then hope that I've got that tape in here real tight. Because we have to push with that. We're going to have our pusher inside that. We don't want that pusher to come right out of the end of that. Now, to make up an eye splice, what we have to do is to take this core and then we have to go into our cover and our cover into our core. Now, the next thing we have to do is, you see we've got our cover here without the core in it. And we've got it taped up. It's going to be loose. You're going to see where the core came out of the inside of that. What we want to do with that now is to cut some of those strands out of there. In the process of making our eye, what we want to do is reduce the material that's inside of the main part of your rope so that it's not so bulky right in here. And we can do that by cutting some of the strands out of this. The procedure we'll use, here's our reference point, here's our extraction point back here. What we want to do is count about 8 pairs of strands. We'll go, you'll see they're in V shapes here. Pull in closer. You can see that these strands are in a V shape here. And what I want to do is go 8 pairs down. You see where this V is right here, and another V over here. I want to go 8 down. Here we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now this is that point right there. And if you want to mark it to make sure it isn't really that particular. If you're off one or here or there, it sure isn't going to hurt anything. But anyway, what we want to do is be kind of approximate. Okay, now what we want to do from this point here, I want to count 5 strands, 5 pairs going in one direction and then cut. And what I'm going to do from there on, I'm going to pull those pairs right out of there, see? So let's do that now. What I'll do is I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I want to cut these 2. And I got to pull them up, make sure they don't snag everything in there. I'll pull them up, and then I'm going to cut them off like this. Okay. Now see, I've got those cut. Now I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again, and I want to cut again. Pull those up. Cut them again. See? Okay, I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. Okay. Now I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. And that should be enough. Okay, see what I've done now? Started out, I went 8. And I want 5, cut, 5, cut, 5, cut, and 5, cut. Now what I want to do is to grab a hold of the strands that go towards the end. I want to grab a hold of those and then just pull them right out of there. Make sure you don't grab the ones going this way or you're going to have a mess. Pull them out towards the end, like that. So grab these, pull them out. Now check let's see if there's some strands that didn't get cut. Be real careful. See, here's a few strands that didn't, fibers I should say. A few fibers that didn't get cut. So what I want to do is make sure I get them cut so I don't snag anything back that way. You'll find if you snag something back this way, you just aren't going to get it straightened out. Your eye never will look right. Okay, I'm pulling them right out of there. And there again, pulling some of these, pulling them right out of there. And then I've got 2 left here. And then I'll just pull those right out of there. Now, you can see what we've done. We've just reduced the amount of material that's inside there. When we tuck the cover into the core and the core into the cover and then slide it all back inside of our rope, you see we're going to have less material. As it goes down towards the end, there's going to be less material there, and it just won't be so bulky. You won't see that knob right towards the end. Now what we have to do is we have to take this piece of tape and replace it again. Okay. Now what I want to do is put a new piece of tape on here because I want to make it just as small as I possibly can so that I can push it into my fid easier. Okay, and I'll make sure those strands don't get away from you. Okay. Okay, now we'll take a piece of tape. This 33 tape works real good because it's highly flexible, and we can tighten it down real tight. Make sure you stretch it as you put it on there, and then run it out to the end. Kind of as smooth a taper as you can. And then when you get out to the end, we'll just pinch it down tight, and then we'll cut it off. And I can't stress the importance of this enough, because if you don't get it, if you don't get that tight on there, that pusher, when you push it through your fid's just going to pop right out of the middle of that. In other words, what we want it to do is to fit right inside of this pusher, and then of course you don't want any strands in here that are going to be, or say any snags. Like if you've got some tape that's maybe sharp right in here, or maybe bulky, you're going to have trouble sliding it through too. That's a tip that I'll tell you. You just can't weigh heavy enough. Just be real careful about that. Okay. Now what we want to do, we've got our strands. We'll get all this junk out of the way. What we want to do is go back to our core. Now you see we've got our knot. We've got our rope here, and what we want to do is to make sure now that our rope in this particular section is in its natural position. In other words, if I actually, you see, I could pull on this core, and I could bunch up this cover coming all the way back here. We know we aren't going to go past our knot, but we want to make sure it's just in our natural position. And a good indication of that is if they're the same size, then it should be in its natural position. Now, this is my core. Now this is my cover. This is my core. What I want to do is mark the spot right here, where the core comes out of the cover. In other words, I'll come in on that too. You see where that core pops right out of the side of that cover. What I have to do is I have to get a hold of that spot now. I'm going to pull it out of there, and then I'm going to mark that so that I know where that's at. We need to mark that extraction point. And what we'll do, we'll mark it with just a single band around it. Put a scribe right around it like that. See? Okay, now the next thing we have to do is we're going to go back here, and we're going to push this cover right back out of our way. Okay, we'll push it back. Okay, now remember we said that we had on our fid here, we had 2 scribe marks on here that will show us the short end of that fid, see? Okay, that's a measurement that we're going to use now. What we want to do is to measure one short fid. Now here's the end of our core. We're going to come back. There's our first, this is our extraction point. We're going to come back one short fid further in on our rope now, and we're going to mark that. Now what we'll do this time, so we can find that, we'll put 2 scribe marks around it, like this. Really, I think a felt tip pencil pen or something like that might work even better than this. Okay, now you see we've got 1, 2. Now what we want to do is go further yet. We're going to go back away from the end, and then we're going to put on our core. Now we're going to put 3 more scribe marks here. We're going to go a short fid, then we go a full fid, and then we're going to put 3 scribe marks around that so that we can find that spot. We have to be able to find those when we start pushing. Okay, now there, we got everything ready. What we're going to do now is to take this cover, and then we're going to push it inside of this core from here to there. In other words, where we have 2 scribe marks to where we have 3. Now to get this cover inside that, what we're going to do is we're going to push this fid through there. And when we push that fid through there, then we're going to use it as a guide. We aren't going to push it inside this fid. We're just going to let the fid guide us right through the inside. Now the core and the cover are both hollow. There's room right inside of those. They're like, this thing is designed a lot like your Killam grips or your cable supports on your underground. They're made the same way. So when you work with this, what you want to do is take an advantage of its design. See, if I grab a hold of the end and push this way, see how it enlarges itself so that I can get that fid through the inside. Actually, the way that's designed, I can grab a hold of that right now and I can pull on that fid, see. It's going to hang on, see. So you want to watch how you grab a hold of that so that it won't tighten up. So when I push that through the inside, make sure I'm right in the center of that core, and then come down here to where I have my three scribe marks, and then I'm going to pop right out of the side of that like that. See. Now you see I've got that fid now. I've got pushed right inside from 2 to 3. And then what I want to do now is to push this core right in place of it. Now all we're using that fid for now is just as a guide. But here's one of the trickiest parts of this. I'm going to be honest with you. This is the second time I'm doing this. Okay, now this time I've got it hopefully tight enough, and so that my pusher won't pop right through the end of that. See, I've got it made up here. Hopefully, tight enough to where it won't pop through. Now, here's another thing too that's kind of a tip that might help you. When you push this, you're pushing this whole assembly right through here now, and all that fid's going to do is guide you. And what I want to do now is to hold on to my core. We're actually inserting the cover into the core. I'm going to hold on to it at this point. If I grab on back here, it's actually going to shrink up here, and it'll actually hang on to it tighter, but I want it to bunch up. Now I want to come in close so that you can just see where the problems could be. Okay. Now you see I want to stick it, you see, at this point right here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on fairly loosely to the core and let that fid pop out of the other end. Now if I've got everything right, it'll slide on through, you see, and then it'll pop out the other side over here. You better pop out the other side. Yeah, here she comes. Okay. See, right there now, when it first comes out, to be real careful there. Take it kind of slow. Maybe work it a little bit. Then you see, just keep right on pushing, and then you see we're actually out the other side. We've got our fid through there. We've got our cover stuck right inside the core now. Push it on through, and then pull everything back out again like that, and just leave it like that. See? Okay. Now we've got that stuck in there. And see, we've also, now what we have to do here, we have to also, I'm going to kind of flop it over here. I'll back out of the way a little bit here. Now what we have to do here now is to go in. Now we're going to take here we want to take this core now and go into the cover. Remember we said the cover into the core. Now we're going to go the core into the cover. And what we want to do is to go into the right spot. Now what we're going to do now is use the pusher again. And then what we want to do is back off a few strands. We don't go in right at the reference point. See, this is our reference point right here. And let's make sure I can show you where we're at here. Okay, here's where we've got our core. Okay. We've got our cover now coming around into our core. Now we're going to take this core into the cover. But what we want to do, here's our reference point right here, our single scribe mark, remember? What we want to do, we want to come this side of that, go towards the end of your row. Go just this side of that mark. Don't go in right at the mark. Open it up. Make sure you split the strands by their pairs now. Come, I'll say like a ½ inch back. Don't go in right at the mark. Come back a little ways. Because you're going to find what we're going to do is we're going to have a crossover point where the two crossover are going to be just this side of that reference spot. And then what we're going to do when we pull our eye together, we're going to have a crossover spot that's going to be tucked back inside of our rope. And we don't want that crossover over here. If we want to have the exact same size eye, you better come back this side of that and come back, we'll say like a ½ inch or so. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is do the same thing. I'm going to thread that through the inside of that cover. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go in near my reference point. And then I'm going to come out right, I'll say a little bit past. Go a little bit past your extraction point. You'll see, now I've got my extraction point down here. I'm going to go a little bit past. And then there again, make sure you don't go in. Make sure you come out where your pairs cross. Like this, see? Okay. Now there, see, we've got our fid in there now, so that we can do the same thing with our core. I'm going to take this core now, and I'm going to put the pusher right inside of it again. And if we can do it as well as we did with the last one, we'll end up with the core inside. Oh crap. I guess we didn't lose it. Okay. That fits on there pretty tight. That's quite a, for the size I have got it, my fid's just long enough and that's it. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this core and I'm going to push it just like I did before. I'm going to push it inside, and there again, now what I want to do is hang on to the far side and let it bunch up. And I'm going to let the whole thing go through. And be careful that your strand goes through. Work it real easy, work it back and forth, it's going through. My core's following, and I'm holding my breath. It's still following. Now we're out to the critical point. Work it around a little bit. Make sure the strands don't grab a hold of it. I prefer to work with larger rope. This 7/8 rope, 7/8 inch rope is really nice to work with. Some don't like say after the rope's been used a while. Some say you're better off to wash the rope, that it works easier. Rope. I guess that's probably good advice because it's a little more flexible. It's clean. It's easier to work with. Now, okay, now what we've got is a situation where our core is inserted. Then what we want to do now is to work both the core and the cover from this end until we get this crossover point. See, you can see, maybe this will be a good time to come in and show you. What we've got is a situation here where the core and the cover are actually going inside of one another. You see, we're here where the core is into the cover. Now here the cover is into the core. And what we're going to have to do is to pull each of those so that that crossover point is down inside. See, I'm going to pull a little bit of each side. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a crossover point tight. And just grab a hold of them and suck them right down in tight. Now I can get them that way. And then you can see that right there, that they're one stuck inside the other. Come in a little bit again. See where we've got our core and cover actually cross over at this point. Now, this is where you have to work with it, be a little more patient maybe at this time. What we want to do is pull that, make sure our crossover point is tight. Then we want to get a hold of that crossover point. Hold on to it right at that point. Make sure it's not going to get away from us so that they'll stay down in there tight. Then what we're going to do is to relax back away from that. Milk the ends of it so that it'll come out to where they will be in their natural positions. In other words, there's equal tension all the way through. And here's where you might have to do a little extra work. Just the thing to watch though is to make sure that crossover point is always held there. If you get a hold of that and say maybe pull the core or the cover back out of there, then that crossover point won't be tight. Then you're going to have trouble pulling every bit of the core back inside the cover of the main cable, the main rope itself. So hang on to that spot and then milk it back so that your ropes are even. So that the core and the cover on either side are even. Now you can see we're looking at the cover here and we're looking at the core over here. Now coming out of that core, we've got the end of our cover. It's from over here through in there. What we can do here is just cut that off and then let it go inside. We'll use our handle again. We'll cut that off. Okay. Then we're going to let that piece we cut off, let that go right inside. See? We'll let it disappear right inside. Okay. Okay, now here's where we're at. We've got, hold on to this point up here, make sure that doesn't get away. Make sure at this time that you get all your slack out of there, see? Okay. Now what we're going to do, here's what we've got to this point. What we're going to do is take the extra slack. We've actually have this all, the core or the cover right here, we have it actually all bunched up coming around here. And what we want to do is milk that back again and let this core go inside, see? In other words, what we're going to do is pull this crossover point right here, right down and inside of our rope here. Now we've tapered that, you see, so that we shouldn't even see a knob down in here where we've pulled our strand down inside, or our strand, but our core. So now the trick here now is to grab a hold of this. Now here's where you may want to use gloves. If you do a lot of this, it's almost a must that you use gloves because you're going to have blisters. Okay, I have to milk this back. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull on this. I'll hold on to my knot here now. You might even want to hook this over on something and then maybe hook it on a hook of some kind and then grab a hold with your gloves and then pull this. Now what's going to happen when I pull on this, you see, and I'll come in so you can see that. I'm gonna pull that extra core up. See how it pulls that core inside? Okay. See how we're gonna pull that down right inside. Now, sometimes you might have to do this 2 or 3 times because what can happen if that slack doesn't get out of there sufficiently enough, then you've got a big knob that you've got to try and pull down in here, and that can be hard to do. Okay. You know, I've got a little bit of extra knob right here. You see that might give me trouble. I'll try one more time. If not, I'll pull it back out of there again. Let's just pull it out now. I want to grab that crossover point, and I'm going to pull that strand, or not my strand, but my core out of there again. Now you see, here's where I'm getting some bunching coming up. I've got a little extra slack right here. I'll pull that back again. Okay, then I'll come back here, and then I'll try pulling it down inside one more time. Okay, it's going to go this time. There we go. Now, you can see now what we've done. We're back to our eye again, the size that we measured. And you can see by our crossover point. Now see, here's our extraction point and our reference line are right together. And what we've got is the core. We've got the core actually coming out of the side. Now the thing to do here is to cut that. Leave it a little long and cut that, and then just poke it inside. Now we've gone past a little past our extraction point, so we don't need to leave much here, and then we'll just poke it inside. If we would have stopped, say, not come out our extraction point, if we would have come out up in here, you would see that after a little usage that you would find that the core might come back up here on your eye a ways. Now that isn't that critical. you see we're poking the end of this core back up in here just to get rid of it. Now, if after a while, some usage, it should get a kind of a raggy look about it here, you'll know that the core is up in here a ways. Now that isn't particularly critical from the standpoint of capacity, because you see, as you lift on your load here, half the load is being applied to both sides of that eye. And of course, we said that half the load was handled by the core and the cover. So even if the core isn't fastened on inside here, you're still getting full rating. You see a good capacity out of your rope because this side is only handling 50% of what you're lifting with your load. Okay, now let's just take this core and we'll cut the extra off. Leave it a little long. Then what we'll do, make sure you cut away from yourself. Now what I'm going to do is cut that. Okay. Now what I want to do to get rid of that, you see that's kind of an unsightly looking thing there that way. So what I'll do is I'll just take my pusher and then I'm just going to poke it right inside there. Make it look neat. Always do nice work. When you go past your extraction point, you don't have to worry about leaving as much. I maybe left quite a little bit here. The more I leave, the more I get stuff inside. But it's kind of nice to leave a little extra if it's, this is going to tighten up in here. And the more it tightens up, the more this stretches, the more call it's going to have for that core. And if you leave it, the more you stick in there, the more core you're going to have to go back up in there in the end. And it's not going to give you any trouble that way. It'll look neater. Okay, just about got it here. A little bit of fray there. Okay, there we go. A little bit of cotton there. Okay. And then we have our eye. Now you see that's what we did. We tapered that, you see. Back off a little bit. We tapered that, you see, and so that where we've got this extra rope stuck down in here, you can barely see. I bet on screen you can't see it, but there's a little bit of a hump right here. And you might, in your larger rope, it might be more obvious. There's going to be more need probably to taper it there than there would be here. But it makes a nice looking eye when you taper it like that. So there we have our eye. One thing they do recommend, and that's that you take some cord and lash this. In other words, if I would go through and back and forth through up to the eye, and then roll it at 90 and go back and forth through the eye and then back, and then tie it, that you probably secure the eye a little more. If it would keep somebody from accidentally pulling this eye apart. If you see, it isn't going to aid the strength at all. You see, it's got an effect of killing grip the way it's designed. You see, or like Chinese handcuffs. Sometimes they'll refer to them. In other words, it's going to hold itself that way. But if somebody would grab a hold of this and then pull on it, they could pull that core right out of the inside of that. So that lashing that might help that. So there we've got our eye.